Welcome back. David Hertel in for Elias. Well, New York's governor signed 2 bills into law which will protect children from social media. Governor Kathy Hochul signed these legislations in a bid to combat addictive social media feeds and protect kids online. One legislation requires social media companies to restrict addictive feeds on their platforms for users under 18, and the second prohibits online sites from collecting, using, sharing, or selling personal data of anyone under the age of 18 unless they receive informed consent or unless doing so is strictly necessary for the purpose of the website. So to help us make sense of all this, and this is an ongoing conversation I've been having with our favorite tech advisor, investor, and author of CTRL ALT Delete, Mitch Joel is back. Good morning, Mitch.
Happy Monday. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. So what do you think about this move by New York State?
So these are interesting moves. The ones that New York State have brought forward are the most recent. We've even heard here locally our Premier Legault talking a bit more about maybe making this a law. Originally, he stated it as a law, came out and said we're going to empower the parents and teachers to make those decisions, and then is now circling back around this. So we're seeing a bit of that groundswell here where it's happening in regions. I would like to see this transfer from provincial or state side to national. When it becomes national and it becomes a cause, I also believe we need a bit of a groundswell here. I think a lot about the leaded versus unleaded gas component that we had, in particular in the U.S., and this was very much led by mothers. And mothers came in and stepped into it. We can also look at things like Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, very active in lobbying for this. I believe that if we had this trickle into national with some type of groundswell, and I think parents would be a great place to start, although parents in this case might be our worst culprits in terms of making this happen, this would be the path for us to pursue. I think there's enough information and data now, enough years and tread on the tires for us to realize this isn't healthy for our kids.
Last week, I was watching a report on this, and the comparison they were using was cigarettes. And I love your lead versus unleaded comparison. I never heard that one, but they showed the CEOs. I think it was back in the 80s when the 7 CEOs of large tobacco companies were all saying one after the other. It's a very famous clip. They were all saying, well, cigarettes are not addictive, one after the other. And obviously we now know they were all lying. And so here, it seems that the missing component here are the actual social media giants who seemingly, even though the data seems clear, they don't seem to care or want to move on this. How do you explain the behavior of the Metas and the other players in this field that don't seem to be reacting at all to what now seems clear that this is hurting our kids?
So one thing we should say is that the U.S. Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, did come out and has called for warning labels like cigarettes on social media. So cigarettes, similar to what we're seeing in tobacco and alcohol, to raise awareness of what he is calling, or his office is calling, this potential harm. And so it is interesting that you make that connection, and that connection is coming through even with the U.S. Surgeon General in the States. Now, in terms of the social platforms, they have a lot of protection on their side, meaning the apps really do have age limits to them already. A lot of them are 14, 16, some of them are 12, there's no doubt. So one is you have parents who are circumventing that and putting in an 18-year-old age for their kids out of the gate, which is enabling them to download it. So there's one aspect, which is just the simplicity of the fact that there are age standards for this, and there is recommended ages for it, and they've been very vocal about it being somewhere in the 16-year-old thing. I'm not defending them, but they have been vocal about that. The other thing we have to know is it's not really about the actual product so much as components of it. So in this case, what we're talking about is an algorithmic-based feed. So if you're YouTube, if you're Meta, if you're Google, what would we want them to say right now if we really think about it? Are they going to completely revamp and change their product? A great example of this would be YouTube. Unfortunately, here in Quebec, we don't have this. But in the rest of Canada and the U.S., there is YouTube Kids, where you can have that version of access to it, and it is fairly limited in terms of the types of content you could see. You also do, as a parent, have control over things from screen time, depending on the device. You have Wi-Fi access tools, so whether it's through your local cable provider or third-party service, you can control the apps, how long your kids are using them, what they're doing with them. It would be challenging for us to strictly put this on the side of the platforms. Now, what we are seeing is they're saying algorithmic feed and the access or use of the data if they're under 18. And I think that that is basically probably the limits of what the government can do to impede on it, because otherwise the companies will say, but we do have protections in place here. There are tools that parents could use if they so desire.
So then the pushback is being, well, we need to be very forceful in the age gating, and then the conversation gets to how. What else could be done to protect our children? Because now the data it's quite alarming, and I'm sure you've seen it, Mitch. I mean, especially for young girls, for example, there's a direct link in terms of self-harm and what they see on social media. Young boys and young men also, the isolation factor. There's direct links now, and it's for parents. It's very alarming. So, I mean, what could be done? I mean, we do it for porn, we do it for alcohol, we do it for cigarettes. Why not do it here for this?
I'm going to be a little contentious here, David.
Please.
Which is, the answer is some parents, not enough parents. And we're talking about a group, whether they are some or whichever camp they're in, that are they in of themselves addicted to these devices. Monkey see, monkey do.
Right.
So our kids from a very young age see us constantly on them, constantly using them, constantly enjoying them, constantly posting. We've talked about that before as well.
Yeah.
The whole sharing thing problem.
Sure.
I can tell you in my work with very senior professionals at the education level, their number one challenge with pushing this forward is parents. That the parents are the problems. In fact, there are instances where there have been lockdowns in schools and parents have used that as the reason why kids should have their phones with them at all times versus rules that are already in place of having no phone usage. That's where I'm talking about this groundswell. That's where I'm talking about a unified front from parents to say, look, we all love this. It's fun. TikTok is fun. I'm the first person to admit that I get lost in the TikTok rabbit hole at any component. My favorite part of killing dead time on a plane is that moment when I sit till it takes off that I can watch TikTok and that time flies by. So I'm just as guilty as everyone else. But we all have to unified look at this and say this isn't good for our kids. We shouldn't be digital helicoptering our kids, constantly texting them during the day. Don't forget to do this. Don't forget about this class. Don't forget what time I'm picking you up. We are so on top of tracking and on top of each other's kids that I think that this is the biggest thing, that if we as parents all united did this, we wouldn't need this legislation at all.
Very interesting point of view as always, Mitch. Appreciate your time.
Anytime, David. Have a great Monday.
You too. Mitch Joel, tech advisor, investor, and author of CTRL ALT Delete. You hear him also on Second Breakfast every Monday morning, with Andrew and now with Ken Connors.